And for this final episode, for this edition of the Rolling Stone, this is going to be a bit of an involved video. And warning, I'm going to do a little bit of complaining. Okay, I'm going to do a little complaining because I have to, unfortunately, with the topic that we're going to be talking in. Sorry, but I haven't complained in the past two previous videos, so I'm owed just a little bit of a complaint. The presumably incoming Biden administration has it has announced, I should say, several goals that it wants to accomplish. And one of those goals is the forgiveness of student loan debt, which has brought this old chestnut back into the foreground. And so you had both sides, the left and the right, start going through their usual dance movements, depending on which side of the aisle they were on. So you saw, for example, AOC, Ilhan Omar saying, oh, absolutely, we should absolutely forgive student debt. It's the right thing to do. People are suffering. And besides, look, we spent all of this money over here. Surely we can simply put it over here and get rid of all this debt. Contrary-wise, on the right, you saw people like Beth Stuckey said, well, give me your best arguments why I should pay for loans that I didn't take out. And that was the general theme on the right. Bad idea, horrible idea, we don't have the money for it, it's not responsible, unjust, etc., etc., etc. At the heart, that's really what it came down to. It's unjust. It is not just for me to pay for student loans that somebody else took out. Now, within all of this heat with very little light, there were some people who were trying to come up with a plan, to create a plan so that this would not happen again. Because let's get one thing straight right off the bat, gang. Student loan debt is not some boogeyman that was created by the left in order to get votes. Student loan debt, I mean, they've used it for that, but student loan debt is a boogeyman all by itself. Currently, or as of 2019, the total amount of student loan debt in the United States was $1.4 trillion. That's trillion with a capital T. So all of the students in the United States who have taken out loans, all of those loans added together amount to $1.4 trillion. That is a horrific amount of debt. And, I mean, it is very crushing to go through life with this debt. You get out of college, and what do? Okay, especially in the world that we live in now with COVID and everything, you really have to take a minimum wage job, right? Or a low-paying job, or whatever. Very seldomly do you immediately get to go into the field that you wanted to get into. And especially if you were going for chemistry, history, or something, you almost are guaranteed, if you want to do anything in that field, you are almost guaranteed that you have to go further beyond just the 4 general years of college, right? You have to go to get a master's degree or a PhD, which means even more student loan debt for you. So it is a genuine big problem. And some people were trying to create a plan to make sure that that would not happen again. There's been an idea that has been thrown about on the right for a while now, for a couple of years now, about seizing the endowments, the charitable donations that are given to colleges and universities, right? Some of these universities, they have, an absurd amount in these endowments. Harvard's endowments in total equals $36 billion. Harvard could forgive the debt of everyone who goes there if it wanted to. And the theory being that if the endowments are quote-unquote seized, then, right, the universities will be dependent upon student tuition to actually stay open. at which point, they're not going to be price gouging, they're going to be working more with people, etc. That's the idea behind it. But there's a flaw in that plan because, as the Acton Institute put it, if you seize the endowments but you don't do anything about federal funding of education, then that's the equivalent of trying to save a drowning man by shoving a hose pipe down his throat. Okay? Other people have suggested, well, maybe you don't need to go to college. Okay? Not everyone should go to college. You don't have to go to college. And that's true. The problem, however, is that you have the entire culture telling you that you need to go to college, that you should go, not just that you should go to college, but that you need to go to college. And the bad thing about that is that that is only half a lie. Because for a lot of jobs, especially the higher paying jobs, we're not talking about the minimum wage flipping hamburgers at McDonald's type of jobs, but for the higher up jobs, okay, the jobs that are above that might actually pay you monthly or annually, a lot of them you need a college degree of some kind. It's like right now in the military, if you want to be an officer, you have to have a college degree. Doesn't matter in what field or in what specific area, you just need to have a degree. Because for them, that is a shortcut. They can say, oh, well, he did this for 4 years, he's dedicated, works hard, is somewhat intelligent. Okay, that's what we're looking for. None of those conclusions are necessarily true anymore, but that's been the general thinking behind it. So you have that problem. A lot of people, and some people, they just want to go into a specific field, right? So they are automatically going to go to college. So you have people who, for example, want to be academics. They want to be historians or chemists or doctors. So they're going to go to college. Then you have a lot of other people who want a better job, and they're being told, well, the only way to get that is to go to college, get a degree so that you can put that on your resume and your application. And then you have people who just want the college experience, the party for 4 years, because the culture has said that that's what they should want. So you can't just tell people that they should not go to college if they don't need it. And that also leads into the problem that sometimes people go to college with a specific plan in mind, but then life deals them a couple of jokers and those plans fall apart. Well, okay, your plans fell apart, but that doesn't help you because now you still have accumulated all of this student debt when plans were different. So what are you going to do now? Some people, including moi, have said, well, what needs to happen is that most people need to end their education at high school. This is actually sort of a refinement of the previous idea. Most people should end their education at high school. And in order to do that, a high school education needs to be the equivalent of, at the very least, a bachelor's education today. The education that someone supposedly, ideally, leaves with when he is handed his bachelor's degree, that's the sort of education that you should have at the end of 4 years of high school. Then, when you're better educated at the end of high school, you won't have to necessarily go to college. So it alleviates that, unless you want to basically go into academia or you want to go into some sort of profession, like a lawyer, a doctor, historian, chemist, physicist, English teacher, etc., or professor, I should say, etc., etc., etc. But all these ideas, reforming high school so that it's much more vigorous, convincing people that they don't all need to go to college, seizing the endowment, stopping federal funding of education, none of that is going to actually solve the problem right here and right now, which is that $1.4 trillion of student loan debt that is crushing an entire generation of Americans. And this is where the right is going wrong, in my humble opinion, because the right is right when it says that the government cannot simply wave its magic wand, put some signatures on some dotted lines, and declare that student debt is gone now. It's been forgiven. First, because it is unjust. Bob over here should not be forced to pay via his taxes the loans and the interest that Joe has accumulated from Joe's own free will, especially when Bob has never gone to college and so did not take out any loans, or even worse, went to college and has already paid back his student loans, and now he is being forced to pay back everyone else's student loans too. I get that. But it's also true that the government can't forgive loans, because then that becomes a form of coercion, and I would say political blackmail even. And that's really why the left is pushing this. They're pushing this first so that everyone will go through the education system, because that's how you are indoctrinated into their ideology, but also so that you will be eternally grateful to AOC and Ilhan Omar and, hypothetically President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first Black Asian woman to be elected to the position of the vice presidency. In case you didn't know or didn't hear us, the last 38,000 times we said it. But it's all intended to make us subservient to them through gratitude. The left will be able to say, hey, we forgave your student loan debts. Don't you owe us something? And human nature being what it is, will be like, yeah, you know what? They forgave my student loan debt. I owe $75,000 of student loans. They forgave it. Those are the people who really care about us. Those are the people who really understand human people. I'm going to keep voting for them. And in case we start thinking, well, I don't know, they can always come back with the classic Animal Farm line. Well, surely, comrade, you don't want Jones to come back, or whatever incarnation the Republican Party is on at that point. Because, if they get into power, they're just going to make you pay back all that money that you took out in the first place. You're like, oh, gee, I don't want to do that, for whatever reason. So, okay, stay in power. So I understand that the government cannot magically wish away student loan debt. However, and this is where the right goes wrong, because simply because the government cannot do that, that does not mean that nothing can be done. For a couple of reasons. First, because people are suffering. And this accumulation of debt, it is hurting people. It's hurting people starting families. People are putting off marriage because they don't want to be saddled with even more student loan debt. And marriage is already in a tenacious position. The marriage rate in the United States is plummeting. And this problem is also compounded because women are becoming more educated and more successful than men. And women, if I can be a paternal a member of the patriarchy for a second, women have a tendency to want to date and marry men who are more successful than they, because it's a sign that, hey, this bloke over here, he's going to be able to take care of me and whatever kids I give him. So that's what they're looking for. So the student loan debt isn't helping that situation. The student loan debt is also keeping people from finding better jobs, because we've said of that vicious cycle with, well, I want a better job, but to do that, I need a degree. But to get the degree, I'm going to have to take out the loans, which means I'm going to have to go into debt, blah, 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 blah. Preventing people from owning homes, etc., etc., etc. It's just a snowball effect. So the long and the short of it is that the student loan debt is an impediment to human flourishing. So the right should want to take some active measures to cure that problem, simply on the basis of that for human flourishing, because we want genuine human flourishing. Not human happiness as however we define in our postmodern world what happiness is, but genuine, honest to God, human flourishing based on our nature, our essence, and our telos, our end or purpose. But there's another reason why the right should really be wanting to actively be trying to solve. There's another specific reason why the right should want to actively be trying to solve the current student loan debt crisis. And that's because human nature being what it is, okay? If you've got two sides, and the one side here on the left says, we're going to forgive your student loans. You won't own a dime anymore. Once you vote for us and you give us the go-ahead, you're not going to have to owe anything anymore. That $60, $65, $70, $75, $80,000 in student loan debt, poof, it's going to be gone. Meanwhile, on the right, you're saying, well, we don't have the money for that, we can't do that, and I am not going to pay for your student loans. Doesn't matter if it's just or unjust. To the recently graduated 24-year-old with $70,000 of student loan debt staring him in the face, all he's hearing is one side saying, I will forgive your student loans, I will help you, and one side saying, I am not going to help you pay back your student loans, I don't care what happens to you. Which side do you think that he's going to gravitate towards? And if you said, well, towards the side that he thinks is going to help him, you would be absolutely correct. Give yourself a pat on the back and a gold sticker and a cookie just for, just to make it complete. You know what? It's so close to Thanksgiving. It's still 2020. Throw in the cookie and a cupcake. Why don't you? So if the right wants to actually destroy the narrative that it doesn't care about people, if it actually wants to draw people away, because the right is always saying, what can we do to attract young people? What can we do to attract young people? Well, then this is a problem that the right should really be investing in. Not how to prevent the problem from happening again in the future, but how to solve the problem now. If you're asking me, if you're staring at the screen and screaming right now, well, Nate, what are your ideas? I have a few, one or two, not much detail because, I'm still kind of just scratching them out. One idea I've had is that instead of companies offering retirement benefits or insurance, why can't companies help pay student loans? The student loans of new employees, right? I mean, this would be predicated on your work ethic and the quality of your work, of course. But why can't that be an option? A recently graduated 22, 23, 24-year-old probably isn't going to be focusing on retirement, right? And if he's still single, which most are still, he's probably not going to be thinking about insurance as much either because he doesn't have a family. So why not offer student loans? That money that went into retirement or insurance go into student loans. Knock that out. Companies then could help people like that. The right could get behind that, could at least suggest it out, okay? Me suggesting it here on my channel doesn't make as much of a splash as someone like, say, Ben Shapiro or Glenn Beck suggesting it because they just have a lot more clout in this little neck of the woods than I do. That's just the way it is. Another idea, the right could start an actual program like the left does. Not another think tank, not another podcast, not another book, not another rally or convention or con or whatever, but an actual program, like a micro loan program where people want maybe to start their own business. They have an idea. They could generate more money with their idea than just finding whatever job comes along their way, minimum wage. As again, especially if they are in small towns or even large towns, right? You could have a microloan program so that people could take out whatever money they needed to start their business, and then interest rates would be artificially low on purpose, because the point is not to make money back. The point here is to help people actually build something on their own so that they can be independent, both of the man and of their student loan debt. Okay, the right could fund this if it wanted to. I'm convinced of it, that the right could. And this really gets into another problem that I will not go into large detail about because I've already been talking for too long. But this really taps into one of the fundamental flaws of the right today. The right is good at talk. The right is very poor at action. And action is what is going to save us, okay? You need words. You need ideas. Absolutely. I am the last one to say that they don't mean anything. But to actually make a difference, you have to put those ideas and words and philosophies into action. To draw an example from our last video about Madison Cowthorne, if the 11 apostles, after Jesus' ascension, again, according to Christian tradition and theology, had just basically stayed and lived in Jerusalem and said, oh, great, you know what? We have all these teachings of Jesus. You know, we're good to go. That's great. And they hadn't actually gone out and preached. The world would be a very different place. In fact, the world would probably be a worse place, I would say, than if they hadn't gone out. If they had just kept the words and the ideas in here and actually hadn't put those into practice, the world would be very different and not nearly as good. But that is the example that I'm going to leave you with today, as well as just the restatement. So the right needs to think outside of the box, cut the Gordian knot, and actually come up with concrete solutions for the problem here and now. Not just with the student loan crisis, but with everything. With everything. It's a tall order. But then again, these people are supposed to be our leaders. They're supposed to be our thought leaders, our political leaders. This is what they're paid to do. This is why we listen to them. This is why we subscribe to their channels. This is why we pay for memberships for their websites and podcasts, etc., etc., etc. Buy their books. This then is what we expect in return. And with that thought, I am signing off, gang, because I have talked way too long. So I will say stay safe, stay free, have a great weekend, and I will chat at you next time. Ciao.